We open on a young office worker named Tamachi, just another day going through the usual motions. His boss, Katagiri, approaches with some friendly praise. He even dangles the possibility of a raise. But Tamachi quickly and awkwardly turns it down. The boss just laughs, chiding him for his modesty. When quitting time arrives, he politely declines a dinner invitation. He has somewhere else he needs to be. A bell chimes as he steps into a quiet establishment. He's greeted by a familiar face behind the counter. He takes a seat at the bar, a regular in this quiet place. The bartender listens as he vents about his day. He explains that at his job, self-esteem is a rare commodity, but he has a different kind of battlefield in mind, one where he's still waiting for his ideal partner to appear. Just then, the door chimes again. A new hostess greets the incoming patrons. Her smile is warm and utterly captivating, and apparently it's super effective. Tamachi calmly compliments the hostess, Gami-san. Gami-san smiles, lost in a memory of her high school days. Meanwhile, Tamachi sinks back into his own thoughts. He's convinced he'll never find a partner. Just then, his phone buzzes with a new message. It's from an online friend asking to meet up. Tamachi is completely taken by surprise. He quickly types back asking what's going on. Apparently, his friend is running away from home, and doing so in the most dramatic way possible. He asks if they have anyone to turn to. His friend's response is brutally honest, mocking the idea of a shut-in having friends. Tamachi freezes in place, phone clutched in his hand. The friend then addresses him as senpai, and Tamachi pictures his online companion, a muscular man in a panda mask and a sailor uniform. He's not exactly thrilled by the request, knowing this person has never met anyone offline before. But then his friend claims to be a beautiful high school girl, and with that, Tamachi's hesitation vanishes in a flash. The friend reveals they're already at his station, waiting with a red suitcase. The news sends our boy into a complete and utter panic. He quickly excuses himself, asking Gami-san to save his seat as he rushes out the door. Gami-san is left completely stunned by his sudden exit. Outside, Tamachi already knows this is a bad idea. He calculates a 200% probability that it's a man, but he can't help but feel a little excited. His mind flashes back 5 years, to the day he first met his friend in an online game, a player who was clumsy and new to the controls, but possessed an unexpectedly aggressive playstyle. They were known for bumping into other players, and that's exactly how the two of them first met. This player, Rina, never seemed to log off, and despite their chaotic nature, Tamachi taught them the ropes. The game became their entire world, much to their parents' disapproval. Now, standing outside the station, he scans the crowd for a red suitcase, and then he spots it. His eyes widen in disbelief, because standing next to it isn't a man, but a genuinely cute high school girl. His gaze drifts down from her face, and he finds himself completely captivated. Her eyes are wide, shimmering with an anxious light. Tamachi snaps back to reality, his mind reeling. He scolds himself for getting lost in the moment. But before he can look away, a hand grabs the back of his jacket. His own eyes widen in pure shock. He turns to find her standing right behind him. His shocked face is reflected in her gaze as she asks if he's her senpai. With tears in her eyes, she introduces herself as Rina, and the confirmation hits Tamachi like a bolt of lightning. The city skyline blurs as his mind struggles to catch up. He walks beside her, their steps falling into an awkward rhythm. He still can't believe it, this is really Rina. She quietly confirms her identity, her voice barely a whisper. He keeps waiting for the prank to be revealed, but all he gets is a quiet, heartfelt apology. As they walk, his mind races, realizing he's bringing a runaway home. He needs a plan, and he needs it before they reach his front door. But time runs out, and they've already arrived. He turns to her, asking if she's truly okay with this. He tries one last gambit, claiming his house is infamous for a string of tragedies. He asks if she's scared, offering her a final chance to leave. But she just pulls her hood tighter, saying it's better than the home she left. Her grip tightens with resolve. Her determination leaves him completely stunned. His resistance finally crumbles. He looks up and quietly agrees. He opens the door, welcoming Rina to his horror house. But inside isn't a haunted house, it's a full-blown otaku shrine. Her eyes light up, filled with stars. Tamachi explains the apartment is a 15-minute walk from the station, and the only reason he can afford it is its tragic history. He says all he owes the past is respect and gratitude. Rina asks if he's all right, but he just rambles on about the previous tenant. She gives him a knowing, almost amused look. Tamachi offers her a drink, trying to be a good host, but she's already found her own altar, kneeling before his figures. She looks up, flustered and at a loss for words. He stands over her, asking if she's noticed how close they are, but she just asks if she can set up her computer. She pulls out her laptop, ready to get to work, and promptly disappears into the next room. Just then, Tamachi's phone buzzes again. It's a message from Rina thanking him profusely. He texts back, reminding her of her claims of being a shut-in. But her next message starts with an apology. She confesses to catfishing him with the beautiful girl story. Tamachi peeks around the corner, asking about her unopened figures. She replies that the only lie was the beautiful part. A sudden realization seems to hit her, leaving her completely flustered. Tamachi texts back, clearly amused by her flustered state. Meanwhile, Rina is having a full-blown crisis. She types out a dramatic message about her defenses being breached. He replies with a challenge, telling her he's more than prepared. He asks her to be gentle in their upcoming battle. And suddenly the battle is no longer metaphorical. He scrambles to clean up, shouting that this is an ambush. But her texts show a warrior who refuses to retreat. He tries to de-escalate, assuring her he has no intention of attacking. She offers to help in a way that leaves him utterly speechless. Tamachi nervously insists he can handle his own maintenance. But Rina remains silent, her expression unreadable. Her fingers fly across the keyboard, sending another message. She insists she can't just stand by after causing him trouble. Tamachi is left completely bewildered by her persistence. And then his eyes widen in shock. A hand reaches for the zipper on her hoodie, her face flushed with a mix of shame and resolve. The world blurs as she begins to pull it down, revealing the simple shirt she wears underneath. Tamachi averts his gaze, completely overwhelmed. He quickly types out a message, telling Rina to stop. But the hoodie is already down. He sends another message, asking what he is to her. Her response is simple. He's her senpai in life. He asks if she thinks he's a coward who preys on weakness. She remains silent, her hand resting on her lap. His question hangs between them, unanswered. And then her fingers fly across the keyboard once more, as teardrops begin to splash onto the keys. Her message confirms it. He's simply her senpai. The scene then shifts back to the familiar bar Gam Gam, where Gami-san is left completely dumbfounded by his story. Tamachi tries to explain that his online friend, Rina, is a runaway high school girl now staying at his place. He sits at the bar, recounting the entire unbelievable tale. Gami-san's composure breaks with a sudden, sharp snap, followed by an absolute explosion of hysterical laughter. She pops a bottle, congratulating him on the sheer chaos, and begins drinking straight from the source before opening hours. She promptly flips the sign, declaring the bar closed for business. Leaning in close, she presses him for every last detail. But Tamachi coolly states he has no romantic intentions for now. He explains that he respects her pure spirit far too much. A noble speech that Gami-san immediately shoots down. She settles back down, taking a moment to process. Lying on the bar, she notes how unusual this is for him. Tamachi simply says he has his reasons for helping. The scene shifts back to his apartment, where Rina is still distraught. She tries to wipe away the tears, her shoulders shaking. Her next message calls him handsome on the inside. He asks about his looks, getting a swift no comment. Their usual dynamic returns, a playful battle of wits. But she quickly sets the jokes aside. She confesses she was relieved he wasn't some creepy otaku, and Tamachi is just glad their old banter is back. He finally asks her to explain why she really ran away. She repeats her earlier story about fighting with her parents, but Tamachi demands she answer him seriously. She finally admits she was being forced to attend high school despite her anxiety. Tamachi pieces it together. Her parents finally lost their patience. Rina admits her spirit was completely broken at the high school entrance ceremony. The news sends a jolt through Tamachi. He suddenly realizes he met her when she was just a little girl, and that under his guidance, she's certainly developed. The sheer social risk of his situation hits him like a truck. He tries to talk her down, suggesting she just go home, but her next message tells him not to underestimate her. She boasts about being a child prodigy who aced every exam with ease. Yet her parents were furious that their genius daughter couldn't even attend class. The news hits Tamachi with the force of a physical blow. Rina explains her parents plan to marry her off when she's of age. He texts back, his mind reeling from the sheer gravity of her situation. He suggests online school, but she says her semi-upper-class family forbids it. Even attending via the nurse's office is out. Her parents reject anything that looks bad. Tamachi asks if her parents will be worried, assuming they'll leave her alone for a bit. But her next message is a simple, chilling correction. She left a note saying she was going to her sister's in Tokyo. He asks if he was her only option, but she says she had to meet him for a reason she cryptically refers to as her goal. Her goal, she types, was simply to meet her senpai. Tamachi frantically texts back, telling her to go to her sister's, but Rina insists he's the only one she can open up to. He argues that his sister is far kinder than he is. Rina agrees, admitting her sister cares for her more than anyone. Tamachi presses the point, asking why she won't go then. But his expression reveals a hidden meaning to that kindness. He explains his sister's brand of kindness is a bit forceful. Rina admits she knows she's in the wrong, but can't bring herself to change. Her message ends with a simple, desperate plea to him. She admits she's already given up on her life. A realization dawns on Tamachi. He understands that Rina has bet everything on this one act of defiance. If he turns her away, she'll be forced back onto the path her parents chose. A future with a man she doesn't know and a life she never wanted. She confesses she only wanted to keep escaping reality with him, but now she's just a burden. And Tamachi realizes he can't truly save her from her fate. All he can do is irresponsibly enable her escape for a little while. Gami-san listens, completely unfazed by his moral dilemma. She gleefully points out he's now shouldering the social responsibility for a runaway. He admits to Gami-san that of course he thought about refusing. But in that moment, he remembered someone else. A boy with no escape, trapped between school and home. The memory of that person comes rushing back. He tells her he's just worried about Rina's state of mind. Gami-san wonders if he's simply overthinking things. But Tamachi explains Rina's history as a shut-in with severe social anxiety. For someone like her to travel so far, he says, shows a desperate kind of resolve. And Gami-san quietly agrees, realizing Rina is just one step from the edge. He told Rina she could stay as long as she needed. But he made her promise never to reveal his identity to her family. Gami-san cackles, realizing he's willingly taken on a human time bomb. Tamachi argues that in exchange, she's handling all the housework. Gami-san slides closer, a thoughtful expression on her face. With a grin, she offers to help him look after his new house guest. The unexpected offer leaves Tamachi completely speechless. She can already tell he's going to need her cooperation. She teases him about knowing what a girl needs, and our boy does not take it well. But she declares herself the perfect person for this particular job. In exchange for her help, Gami-san has just one condition. He has to tell her absolutely everything that happens. The night deepens as Tamachi finally heads home. He realizes a quick 1-hour trip somehow turned into 4. He recalls Gami-san's offer, regular updates in exchange for free drinks, a deal he finds incredibly appealing as he unlocks his door. But as he steps inside, a sound catches his attention. Rina peeks out from a doorway, shyly welcoming him home. Tamachi freezes, completely caught off guard by the greeting. She thinks to herself it's been over a decade since she said those words to anyone. He quietly announces that he's home. Tamachi, still processing the situation, wishes her a good night. She returns the sentiment, her eyes fixed on him from across the room. The door slides shut, leaving her alone once more. Her hand rests on her laptop, her mind still racing. She can't believe he actually accepted her into his home. The battle she'd prepared for never came, leaving her completely off balance. Later, tucked into her futon, she stares up at the unfamiliar ceiling. So much has happened in such a short amount of time, and her mind drifts back 1 month to the place where it all began to unravel. It all started at the high school entrance ceremony. The sound of applause was a crushing wave of anxiety. Even as a child, her only real friend was a screen. She was a shut-in, but also a prodigy. She'd only show up for exams, acing every single one. Her father was satisfied as long as she produced results. She foolishly believed high school might be different. A new teacher, a new classroom, but the same old pressure from her family who had zero chill. While everyone else cheered for their bright future, she was drowning. The school was a nightmare of forced social interaction. She wondered how she could ever survive in such a place. Just then, a classmate approached her desk. She looked up, completely caught off guard. He introduced himself with an unnervingly wide grin. His smile was a lot, and her social anxiety immediately kicked into overdrive. She flinched away as another student called out to him. A girl told him to back off, pointing out he was scaring her. He was quickly dragged away by his friends. The boy's face is a blur, his words just more noise. The classroom becomes a gallery of grotesque, laughing faces. Her vision spirals into a vortex of pure panic, and so she retreated back to her gilded cage. Her mother's voice cuts through the door, asking about her absence. She mentions that her classmates have come to visit, but Rina can only beg her to make them leave. That night, the tension in the house finally boils over. Her door is thrown open with sudden, startling force. Her father looms over her with a chilling ultimatum. He tells her she's to be married off to secure a family connection. And in that moment, her entire world collapses. She rejects his archaic values, wanting no part of their world. Her mother suggests she turn to her sister for help. Her sister, who always protected her, is now in Tokyo. But even that thought offers no comfort. She knows her sister would just force her into a normal life. A life she feels is already over. She'd be just another face in the crowd, lost and alone. And a dangerous thought begins to form in her mind. A fantasy of taking her family with her in a blaze of glory. A desire to be remembered for something, anything at all. She even begins researching how to make her dark thoughts a reality. But just then, a message arrives from her senpai. The notification pulls her back from the edge, and a new desperate hope takes root. She wants to meet him. With a new plan in mind, she gathers her funds. She pens the note for her parents, telling them not to look for her, and she packs her bag, placing a bet on her future. If he refused to see her, she'd go to her sister's, but if he accepted, she could postpone her end just a little longer. She just wanted to escape reality, with no thought for the future. The thought of meeting him was both terrifying and thrilling. She was placing her entire life in the hands of a stranger. And so her journey began, starting at the airport. The journey is already taking its toll on her. She sits in the waiting area, gathering her strength for the trip ahead. Her eyes scan a digital map, planning her next move. She navigates the unfamiliar public space one step at a time. Her phone chimes as she passes through the ticket gate and boards a bus, taking another step into the unknown. The long bus ride leaves her completely drained. She finds refuge in a familiar fast food chain. Even ordering a simple drink is an ordeal for her. But it has the one thing she needs, a connection to the outside world. She slumps over the table, utterly exhausted by the effort. She remembers it's Friday, the day her senpai goes to Gummi-san's bar. With trembling hands, she decides to seize the moment. The nerves are almost overwhelming as she prepares to type. 10 minutes pass as she waits for his response. After 20 minutes, the silence is deafening. A stranger bumps into her, apologizing as she flinches at her laptop. Her trembling fingers hit send, the message flying out into the world, and she's immediately consumed by a wave of pure, unadulterated panic. Just then, a reply from her senpai pops up, asking what's going on. She sits alone in the corner of the restaurant, isolated from the world. With no other choice, she steels her resolve. It's time to channel her inner chaos demon, the mighty panda warrior. She recalls their conversation, explaining she's on the run from her parents. He calls her escape dynamic, and she agrees with a smug grin. A small private laugh escapes her lips, a brief moment of relief. She playfully asks if he's looking to hire a home security guard. But his replies suddenly stop, leaving her message on read. She worries she's annoyed him by asking for help so suddenly, but she has no intention of backing down now. She decides to use her genius to trace his thoughts and reel him in. She recalls her ultimate bait, the claim of being a beautiful, untouched high school girl, and his immediate, enthusiastic reply to come get her. A perfect catch, hook, line, and sinker. The memory makes her blush, hunched over her laptop in the restaurant, because talking to him is the most fun she ever has, the only person who truly understands her. She remembers that after her mother passed, he was the only one who offered her kindness. Their online world was the only place she ever felt she belonged. But now she's in the real world, about to meet a complete stranger. And she's fully aware of the risks of going to an adult man's home. But compared to the bad end her family has planned, this is a gamble worth taking. Still, her mind can't help but conjure images of the worst possible stereotypes, the kind of guys you only read about in cautionary tales online. She clasps her hands together, sending a desperate prayer to the heavens. Please, please don't let him be that kind of otaku. And then her head whips around. Her eyes lock onto a figure across the way. It's him, just a normal-looking guy. The scene flashes back to that first meeting at the station. Her gaze is fixed, her mind racing. She had called out to him, her voice trembling. His clothes were exactly as he'd described in his message. And his face was surprisingly normal, maybe even a little handsome. A quiet wave of relief washes over her. She wonders if she's allowed to be this lucky. He could only watch, scratching his head as she walked ahead. Her hand clutched her hoodie, a quiet sound escaping her lips. The next morning, a new day begins under an unfamiliar ceiling. Rina lies awake, her face flushed as the memories return. She sits up, the reality hitting her. She's at her senpai's house. A quiet, contemplative look crosses her face. He had actually agreed to let her stay here. She remembers his online persona, a warrior ready for battle. But when the moment came, the promised fight was indefinitely postponed. She wonders if it's really okay to be so unguarded around him. She realizes he's being careful, valuing their online connection. Her gaze drifts to the sliding door to her senpai's room. She reaches out a hand, knowing he's just on the other side. Leaning in close, she tries to listen for any sound. But she's met with complete and utter silence, until a sudden violent rattling erupts from the other side. The strange noise sends her into a full-blown panic. And just as suddenly, the door slides open. It's just Tamachi, calmly making coffee and wishing her a good morning. Rina can only stare back, her mind completely blank. She wonders how many years it's been since she's spoken that simple phrase. She knows she should say something back, but the words won't come out. Tamachi turns back, sensing her sudden silence. He just offers a casual thanks, completely missing the gravity of the moment, and his simple reply leaves Rina utterly speechless. Her mind completely short-circuits, unable to process his reaction. Meanwhile, Tamachi gives a thumbs up and disappears into his room. A true master of social grace, Rina is left standing alone, still reeling from the interaction. She slumps against the wall, realizing he's not the rom-com protagonist she might have imagined. But then he reappears, holding out a bag, a welcome gift for his new home security guard. He asks if she ditched her phone, offering her a new one. Her eyes widen at the brand new smartphone. She thanks him, but he tells her to try speaking her replies. The very thought sends her into a state of shock. He explains that vocal cords are muscles that need exercise. He then asks about dinner, checking for any allergies. Her brain practically splits in two, trying to process his kindness. He opens the fridge, revealing a rather sparse selection. Her hand clenches the fabric of her hoodie, as she manages to stammer out that she has none. And in a surprising show of affection, Tamachi gives her a gentle pat on the head, praising her for speaking. The simple gesture leaves Rina completely flustered. He moves on, checking the fridge for dinner ingredients. But before he can decide, a small hand grabs the back of his shirt. With a blush, Rina declares that she will handle it. Her chosen opponent, a single unassuming onion, she brandishes a kitchen knife with trembling hands as Tamachi begs her to be careful. He asks the obvious question, has she ever cooked before? She admits that back home, the maids handled all the cooking. Tamachi just sighs and tells her to watch him do the first half. With a flash of steel and a blur of motion, the onion is perfectly diced in seconds. He presents his work to a completely stunned Rina. She's in awe of his skill, calling him a pro. He casually mentions he's been cooking for himself since middle school. The news leaves her speechless as he boasts about his homemade pork, and pulls out 2 thick, juicy-looking slices to prove it. He proudly offers her a taste of his creation. The offer sends her mind into a complete spiral. She stares, completely flustered by the gesture. She flinches, clearly not used to this kind of interaction. But she hesitantly accepts the bite. Her cheeks puff out as she admits it's delicious. Inspired, she turns back to the kitchen knife, and promptly grabs it by the sharp end. Tamachi lunges forward, grabbing her arm in a panic. He tells her to hold the knife firmly, like this, his hand gently guiding hers into the proper grip. The sudden closeness sends Rina into a blushing mess. He leans over her, praising her for getting the hang of it. She tries to focus, but his presence is completely overwhelming. But then she makes a rookie mistake, rubbing her eye with her onion-covered hand, and the inevitable waterworks begin immediately. She texts him that onions are pure evil as he suggests a break. A couple of cold drinks later, the crisis is averted. Tamachi asks if she's afraid of knives, but she just types a reply. She explains that in her life, holding a knife usually means something else entirely. She texts that she always imagined using it on humans, and Tamachi is her first, which leaves him completely baffled. Rina looks at her phone, asking what he's even talking about. But then a sudden realization hits her like a ton of bricks. He calmly states that he knows she was planning a bad end, and then dismisses her chosen method as highly inefficient. His bizarre logic leaves her completely stunned. He explains that her style is quantity over quality, like chasing a high score. He lays out her entire dark fantasy, a theatrical crime to go down in history. She looks up, touched, telling him not to act like a good person now. She asks if he understood all that and still let her stay. Her hand clenches around her glass, the tension palpable. She downs the rest of her drink in a single desperate gulp. Then she stands, flexing, and declares she's ready to try again. The result is a plate of fried rice that looks lovingly crafted. She texts that sometimes motivation just isn't enough. But Tamachi leans in, ready to taste her first creation. He closes his eyes and declares it's actually delicious. He then offers a spoonful back to her, telling her to try it. Rina freezes, completely stunned by the simple gesture. Her hand goes limp, the spoon clattering against the plate. Her mind races with a list of all its flaws. The texture is uneven, the seasoning is off. But as she tastes it, she admits it's delicious, and she realizes the simple joy of sharing a meal with someone else. With dinner finished, Tamachi sets down his spoon. He lays out the terms of her stay. She'll handle the chores. Then he asks if she knows the most important job in the kitchen. Rina is completely blindsided by the sudden pop quiz. He explains it's the tedious tasks you can't afford to skip. The answer, of course, is washing the dishes, a task Rina accepts with a level of enthusiasm that is frankly a little concerning. and so her training in the domestic arts begins. Next on the list is a crash course in laundry. He tells her they just need to hang it up to dry. But as they sort the clothes, he pulls out a surprisingly delicate item. He can't help but ask why she owns something so fancy. The question sends Rina into a state of absolute panic. She texts that for a shut-in, she puts a lot of effort into her appearance. And she reveals the reason. To avoid her sister's wrath. He explains that his sister's constant nagging is what taught him to take care of himself. Rina texts back that his sister sounds like a truly kind person. He then poses a classic hypothetical. A beautiful person with a bad personality, or the opposite. She replies that whoever created that question must have been both ugly and mean. But Tamachi argues for a third option because of course he does. Rina texts that in this world, being beautiful is its own reward. A quiet, serious look crosses her face. Tamachi admits that if she'd been a man, he would have just wished her well from afar. She asks what if she was just a normal girl, not the ideal he'd built up in his head. He turns the question back on her, asking what she would have done if he was a monster. She texts that if he'd been a monster, she would have just lost her will to fight and run. Her mind flashes back to her own sister's forceful brand of kindness. A sister who would do anything to ensure Reina could live an easier life. But Tamachi tells her he's not like that at all. He says the responsibility for her choices is hers alone to bear. Just then, a sudden clatter from his room breaks the silence. Rina cautiously crawls over to investigate the sound. She peeks through the crack in the door, her eyes wide, and finds Tamachi, dressed and casually announcing he's heading out. She looks up, completely stunned by his sudden departure. She frantically texts him, telling him to wait. He explains he's just returning to Gami-san's bar after leaving so suddenly. He just tells her it's time for the home security guard to get to work. Then, his expression turns serious. He decides to tell her the full, dark history of the apartment. A sordid tale of cults, robberies, and mass tragedies. A place with a history so grim it feels cursed. He explains that all the previous victims died on the second floor. A fact Rina quickly connects to the laundry they just hung up. He just cheerfully says he's looking forward to seeing how the prodigy handles it. He tells her he's just going to talk to Gami-san about her situation. Rina texts back, worried he'll get reported to the authorities. But Tamachi assures her that Gami-san can be trusted. A sudden, sharp realization seems to hit Rina. Her gaze drifts to a t-shirt with a rather unique design. The sight sends her into a flustered panic as Tamachi says his goodbyes. He waves, telling her to pay her respects to the house's tragic history. And with a click of the lock, she's left completely alone in the dark. Just then, a sudden loud crash echoes through the apartment. She turns to find it was just a folding table, clearly possessed by the spirit of bad timing. The sudden noise sends Rina stumbling backward in a panic. The culprit, a single piece of her own laundry, falling from the line. She takes a deep breath, deciding to change her way of thinking. She reminds herself that Tamachi has lived here for 5 years, safe and sound. The fallen garment lands squarely on her face, a truly dignified moment. She tries to understand his advice about respect, but the concept is lost on her. Until a sudden, brilliant realization dawns on her. She understands now that for her, this horror house is a blessing. The feeling of a constant presence means she's never truly alone. And so, she kneels before the altar, praying to her new guardian gods. She introduces herself to the spirits of the house, asking for their blessing. She vows to keep the apartment cleaner than ever before, and asks her new unseen neighbors to please look after her. Her prayer hangs in the silent, empty room. She opens her eyes, wondering if that was enough, and is immediately overcome by a wave of pure, unadulterated spiritual energy. Just then, a strange scratching sound comes from behind the curtain. The sudden noise sends her flying back against the wall in a panic. She cautiously peeks toward the sound, her heart pounding. Her expression shifts from terror to utter confusion. She's left alone with her fears, begging for her senpai to come home. And when he finally returns, he's greeted by a radiant smile. She's already taken on her new role, asking if he wants dinner or a bath. Tamachi steps out of the shower, washing away the day's stress. He finds a fresh set of clothes waiting for him, courtesy of Reina. A delicious aroma begins to drift through the apartment. Rina is in the kitchen, hard at work preparing their meal. She sits at the table, presenting her creation with a proud smile. A text message announces that tonight's dinner is pork steak. She then texts him from across the table, asking if he likes it. He throws his hands up, realizing this is far too comfortable. He shouts that this lifestyle will turn him into a completely useless human. And just like that, 2 months have passed since he hired his home security guard. Freed from all chores, he's come to realize he can't live without her. But their real battlefield remains online, as he asks if she's ready to die. Rina simply puts on her headset and confirms that she is. The two of them sit back to back, completely absorbed in their digital world. Their avatars stand ready as the battle is about to begin. The screen erupts into a flurry of chaotic action. In the game, he spots a vehicle and asks if she wants it. He tells her to get in, ready to run down the competition. But a sudden warning flashes across his screen. Another vehicle is barreling straight toward them, and it's Rina, opening fire from the driver's seat. She coolly confirms the kill after running him over. The sound of gunfire echoes through the digital landscape. Tamachi spots the last remaining opponent hiding behind a tree. He asks if she has any grenades, but they're both out. So he tells her he'll act as bait while she gets in position. He breaks cover, drawing the enemy's fire. He takes cover, drawing the enemy's attention. Rina's avatar takes the brunt of the attack, lining up the perfect shot in the chaos. And with a single, precise hit, she ends the match. Back in the real world, she celebrates their victory. Tamachi congratulates her on the perfect final shot. The two of them share a triumphant high five. He then asks if she's noticed something about herself. He points out that when she's gaming, she never stutters. The realization leaves Rina completely taken aback. He asks if she's ready for another round. Her hands clench, ready for the next battle, and she eagerly agrees, her confidence soaring. The scene then shifts to a sweltering summer day. The sun beats down with unrelenting force. Tamachi trudges through the city, completely drained by the heat. Sweat pours down his face as he seeks refuge. He finally arrives at a familiar fast food joint and takes a long, desperate drink of a cold beverage. He basks in the simple, life-saving glory of an iced coffee. He decides to take his time, leaving Rina to face the horrors of the apartment alone. But his quiet moment is interrupted by a voice calling his name. It's the hostess from Gami-san's bar, surprised to see him. She joins him as he explains he's out buying a new mouse for his roommate, whose gaming habits are a bit intense. He casually notes this is the first time they've met outside the bar, but she quickly corrects him, insisting that's not true at all. She stares at him, her gaze intense. He changes the subject, noting how different she looks in casual clothes. A comment that seems to completely short-circuit her brain, leaving her a flustered mess as he looks on, confused. She quickly apologizes, blaming her reaction on the sweltering heat. She takes a moment to compose herself and takes a long, cooling sip of her drink. Tamachi notes that she seems very different from when she's at the bar. The observation seems to completely short-circuit her brain once again. This is Kurumi, a university student who works part-time at the bar. They make small talk about the oppressive Tokyo summer, until he reveals he's also from Hokkaido, which leaves her completely stunned. She eagerly asks if he's from Sapporo, just like her. And as he takes a drink, Tamachi quietly remembers that Reina is too. The comment leaves Kurumi a blushing, flustered mess. She turns to Tamachi, asking if he believes in fate. He's completely taken aback by the sudden serious question. She explains she's a sucker for dramatic love stories, but they always end badly for her. Tamachi thinks to himself that most guys would jump at the chance to be with her. She then admits that she's currently in love with someone, but despite their fated meeting, he's completely oblivious to her advances. Tamachi wonders if such a dense man could possibly exist. She looks down, clearly embarrassed by the whole situation. He just laughs, as she explains that her usual charms are having no effect. She explains that a friend once told her that her cuteness was practically a crime. Tamachi leans in, teasing that she's clearly aware of it, which earns him a spit take. He just smiles, completely unfazed by her reaction. She asks if he's into girls who are conscious of their own appeal. He casually admits he prefers them, leaving her completely surprised. A bright, genuine smile spreads across her face at his words. She declares that she's found a new love and won't fail this time. Tamachi quietly hopes that her feelings will be returned. Her eyes sparkle with a newfound sense of hope. She agrees enthusiastically, while our boy sips his drink, still the densest man alive. But their conversation is cut short by a tap on the glass. A girl with braided hair explains she's the friend Kurumi was waiting for. She pulls Kurumi aside as Tamachi decides to take his leave. The friend wants to introduce him, much to Kurumi's flustered surprise, but Tamachi just waves it off, promising to see her back at the bar. He heads back to the counter to finally pick up his order. As he walks out, he worries that Rina might be angry he took so long. Just then, his attention is caught by someone else in line. He recognizes the woman as Kurumi's best friend. He recalls that she also moved from Sapporo, thinking what a small world it is. He can't help but notice how beautiful she is, almost like a glimpse of what Rina might become. A strange thought begins to form in his mind. He remembers that Rina's sister also attends a university in Tokyo, but he quickly dismisses the idea as an impossible coincidence. But as he leaves, a pair of eyes follows him. Her gaze is sharp, filled with a sudden dawning recognition. She stands frozen, the pieces clicking into place. Back at the apartment, the day continues as usual. He calls out to Rina as they share another meal together. He asks about her shirt, which seems a little snug. He explains it's an old one he brought by mistake, and she suggests he just buy new clothes. But she playfully asks what he'd like to see her wear. And his mind immediately conjures a gallery of classic costumes. From shrine maidens to cat girls, the possibilities are endless. He savors his meal, completely lost in his own world. He snaps back to reality, asking for a second helping, just as a button on her shirt finally gives up the ghost. He notes that his security guard never misses a detail, so he just bought some normal clothes. The scene then cuts to a grand university building, as a new name is called out. The scene shifts to Kurumi's friend, who's being confessed to by a classmate, but she gently turns him down with a quiet apology. She explains that she's on her way to see the person she truly likes. The scene flashes to Rina, sleeping peacefully in Tamachi's apartment. We're introduced to Madoka, a university student hopelessly in love with Tamachi, a girl who is, by her own confident admission, incredibly cute. But for the first time ever, her charms have completely failed, leaving her in a crisis. And so she's found her way to a familiar suburban home. She stands before Tamachi's infamous horror house, her heart pounding. She insists she's not a stalker, just a very, very curious researcher. Her foot accidentally kicks a loose stone on the path. A nearby resident watches with a knowing, almost amused expression. And just then, a potted plant topples from a ledge, shattering below. The old woman simply remarks that it fell over. Madoka is horrified, convinced it's the curse of the infamous house. She realizes she's already stepped onto the property in her shock. But her fear is replaced by excitement as she sees the front door. She nervously looks around, making sure no one is watching her. She reasons that while entering is a crime, a little peek can't hurt. Her eyes narrow with resolve as she leans in closer to the door. But from inside, a pair of eyes watches the door. A faint sound echoes from within the apartment. Madoka peeks through the mail slot, her own eyes wide with curiosity. She knows Tamachi should be at work. The house should be empty. Her mind flashes back to the stories of its tragic past, and Tamachi's strange belief that respect is all that keeps the spirits at bay. He'd warned that any trespassers would meet a terrible end. And just then, she sees a face on the other side of the mail slot. She tries to deny it, convinced it's just her imagination. But inside, Rina realizes she's just been spotted. Rina scrambles backward, wondering if it's a burglar or a poltergeist. She knows a shut-in like her is no match for a real intruder. But she has a plan. Use the house's reputation to scare them off. She sends a collection of figures crashing to the floor. She peeks out, wondering if the intruder has gone. But just then, another loud clatter echoes from outside. Madoka turns back, startled by the sudden noise. She looks down to find a black cat rubbing against her leg. The cat gives her a look of pure, unadulterated judgment. Madoka snaps at the feline, telling it to mind its own business. The cat gives one last meow and walks away, its job done. Undeterred, Madoka tries to peek through a window. She complains that she can't see anything from this angle, but her curiosity gets the better of her. Her hand reaches for the door, and is met by a pair of terrifying eyes from the darkness. The sight sends her stumbling back in absolute shock. She scrambles away from the door, her research officially over. A terrified scream echoes from the cursed property, and Madoka flees for her life, never looking back. She peeks out the window, wondering if the intruder was a woman. Meanwhile, Madoka has taken refuge in a familiar fast food joint, where she's apparently ordered enough fries to feed a small army. She's still trying to process the terrifying things she saw back at the house. But her day is interrupted by a stranger bumping into her. A guy who then proceeds to help himself to her food. As she walks away, he shouts after her, calling her rude. But his tirade is cut short by a sudden, jarring shock. He's just made eye contact with the very thing Madoka fled from, a sight that leaves even the other patrons completely stunned. The encounter leaves Madoka having a complete public meltdown. Later that night, back at the infamous horror house, Tamachi arrives home, casually asking about the intruder. He explains that the house's reputation is the only thing that keeps them from getting reported. But he quickly changes the subject, turning to Rina. He reaches out a hand and praises her for a job well done as his security guard. The simple gesture of thanks leaves her blushing happily. Meanwhile, the night continues over at Bar Gam Gam, where Gami-san is surprised by a frantic Madoka bursting through the door. Gami-san asks why she looks so pale, seeing her panicked state. Madoka can only stare back, her eyes wide with terror. She begins to explain that earlier today, she may have committed a little light trespassing. Gami-san calmly puts the pieces together. She went to Tamachi's house and sensed a presence. With a mischievous grin, she decides this little secret is just between them. A thoughtful, almost calculating look crosses her face. Madoka asks if Tamachi lives alone, and Gami-san confirms it with a smile. Her fingers tap together as a plan begins to form. She leans in close, suggesting that if she saw something in that house, it must have been a ghost. The scene shifts to a quiet, unassuming suburban home. Gami-san leans in, suggesting Madoka saw something she wasn't meant to see. The very thought sends Madoka into a fresh wave of panic. A terrified scream echoes across the city skyline. Back at the bar, Madoka has melted into a puddle of pure despair. The story then cuts to an office where a new face announces he's finished his work. His boss is impressed, noting he's completed a 5-day task in record time. A colleague approaches, asking about the status of Tamachi's work. The two men sit down, their conversation a familiar office rhythm. The scene settles in the break room, a place for quiet conversations. A can of coffee is cracked open. Katagiri notes the recent change in Tamachi's demeanor. Tamachi explains he's just taking better care of himself, conveniently leaving out the part about his new live-in maid. The boss wipes his glasses, considering his employee's words. He admits that while Tamachi lacks ambition, his work has been impressive lately. He once again dangles the possibility of a raise and more responsibility. The offer hangs in the air, forcing Tamachi to consider his future. But he quickly and decisively waves the idea away. He tosses his can, explaining he's perfectly content with his current position. After all, his only real goal in life is to make it to 30. Katagiri asks what he'll do after that, but Tamachi just says he'll decide then. He turns to leave, the conversation seemingly over, but his boss warns him that his current path will be difficult later in life. Tamachi quietly thinks that if he's disposable by then, so be it. He just smiles, saying he'll try new things and rely on his friends. Later that evening, he arrives home, complaining about the oppressive heat. He unlocks his door, hoping for a cold dinner to cool him down, but as he steps inside, he's hit by a wall of intense, stifling heat. He wonders what's going on as a familiar voice welcomes him home. It's Rina, her face flushed and sweating as she offers a quiet apology. He stumbles forward, completely bewildered by the situation. She explains that dinner isn't ready yet, but Tamachi grabs her, demanding to know why the AC is off. He presses a cold towel to her face, trying to cool her down. He asks why she'd endure this heat as she worries about the electric bill. He calls her an idiot, asking what would happen if she collapsed. He reminds her that as a runaway, she can't even go to a hospital. His rant finally ends, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Rina can only offer a quiet, flustered apology. She presses her head against the wall, promising to cool down. Tamachi just stands there, his lecture finished. He scratches his head, feeling a little embarrassed. He sinks to the floor, realizing he might have gone too far. Meanwhile, the sound of a shower starts up. Rina lets the cool water wash over her, a welcome relief. She admits to herself that her senpai was right. She knows that staying healthy is part of her duty as his guard. Vowing to use the AC from now on, she reaches for the laundry and is hit by a sudden, horrifying realization. She forgot a towel and her only clothes are in the wash. Her only available equipment is a single tiny handkerchief. And to get to her room, she has to pass right by Tamachi. With no other choice, she steels her resolve. It's time for a desperate, towel-less dash for freedom. But then she remembers the laundry hanging upstairs. If she can just get dressed without incident. A sudden, horrifying memory comes rushing back. She freezes in place, her escape plan in tatters. Her past self had already brought in her own laundry. And now she's left cursing her own infuriating competence. With no other options, she decides she has to do that. She cautiously steps out into the living room. She peeks around the corner, hoping her senpai is gone, but realizes he's just waiting for her to finish. She decides to make a run for it anyway, a truly flawless plan, but is immediately caught in the act by Tamachi. She stands there in his hoodie, asking if she's done. The two of them are frozen in the hallway, and Tamachi's gaze slowly drifts downward. He notices the borrowed hoodie is a rather poor fit. A panicked scream echoes through the apartment, but it's just Tamachi, helping to dry her hair. He thanks her as she playfully suggests a viewing fee for the service. He then apologizes for his earlier outburst about the heat, but Rina insists it was her fault for being so careless. He tells her not to worry about things like the electric bill. She offers him all her money, but he just tells her to use it freely. With the drama over, he admits he's starving, and Rina presents a simple but delicious-looking meal. Tamachi digs in, completely satisfied. He praises the meal, a dish that soothes his very soul. He gives her another head pat, praising his excellent security guard. Rina then brings up a police car she saw the other day, but Tamachi doesn't recall, blaming his busy work schedule. She reminds him of a local tragedy that made the news. The culprit, she explains, was the family's underage son, and suddenly, our boy is very, very interested in the local gossip. She begins to recount the story from the online news, explaining the boy was the second son, with a brilliant older brother. He lived a miserable life, constantly compared to his sibling. She explains that one day, after a bad test score, his parents berated him for hours. Rina sighs, the story clearly hitting a little too close to home. They told him they wished he'd never been born. That night, the boy lay in his bed, the words echoing in his mind, until he finally rose, walking to his parents' room. His mother woke, sensing a presence in the dark, and was met with a chilling, shadowy figure looming over her. Rina explains that in that moment, the boy finally felt like he'd found himself. But then she adds a twist. The boy wasn't the true culprit. The real villain, she declares, was the house itself. She explains the family's relationship soured right after they moved in. She cheerfully declares that the whole tragedy is just entertainment, and that other people's misfortune makes her food taste even better. She texts that she understands the boy's feelings, having lost the parent lottery herself. Tamachi quietly reads her message as he eats. He points out that she also ran away from a forced marriage. He then asks if her mother was the same, since she's never mentioned. But Rina's reply is swift. Her mother was a 5-star, god-tier pull. She explains that because of her mother, a happy future was supposed to be guaranteed. A memory of a younger, happier time with her mother flashes through her mind, a time when she was happy, carefree, and completely unaware of the tragedy to come. She explains that one day she got lost. She remembers her kind mother and her cool older sister. She calls her childhood the best time of her life. But that happiness was destined to crumble in an instant. The memory of her mother is a warm, comforting light. Until the day she was suddenly gone, her father buried himself in his work, hiring a housekeeper to take her place. Her sister started going to school, moving on with her life. But Rina was left behind, trapped in her grief. The new housekeeper was kind, offering a gentle smile. She took care of Rina, a replacement for the mother she'd lost, until one day a knock came at her door. It was her sister, asking if she had a moment. 4 months had passed since their mother's death. Her sister said she understood how painful it must be, but she couldn't stay locked away forever. They had to overcome this sadness for their mother's sake. Her sister held her hands, trying to pull her from her grief. She insisted that Rina had to overcome this sadness, but Rina could only sit there in silence. Her sister leaned in closer, her words a gentle but firm command. She smiled, a bright and unwavering show of support, and pulled Rina into a tight, almost suffocating hug. Rina knew her sister was right. She had to be more positive, and so she tried to return to her old life at school. Her classmates were shocked to see her back in the classroom. They gathered around her desk, saying they'd heard about her mother. A classmate tells her to take her time, her expression full of concern. Rina tries to speak, her voice barely a whisper, and she manages a tearful thank you, overwhelmed by the kindness. But her genuine emotion is met with cruel, mocking laughter. A boy points and jeers at her for crying, even as his friend tells him to stop. The bully just keeps going, finding her pain hilarious. Another girl steps in, telling the boys to leave her alone. But in Rina's mind, their faces begin to warp and distort. The classroom becomes a prison, the sound of laughter echoing all around her. And that one boy's cruel cackle was all it took to break her spirit. The memory sends Rina into a fit of uncontrollable sobbing. Her classmates could only stare, completely stunned by the outburst. They rush to her desk asking if she was okay. One girl scolds the bully as another suggests taking Rina to the nurse's office. A friend leads her away as Rina wonders why she has to endure this. She retreated back to the familiar safety of her home. Her sister found her there, surprised she'd come home so early. She gently asked if something had happened at school, but Rina just shook her head, insisting that nothing was wrong. She had tried to be brave, but in the end, it changed nothing. Her sister's hands gently held hers. She insisted that Rina could overcome anything. She told Rina that a prodigy could easily handle this, that everything would be fine. Her sister glanced over, her expression unwavering. She offered a bright, almost blinding smile, seeking agreement. But Rina could only wonder why her sister had such baseless faith in her. The words of encouragement fell on deaf ears, and from that day forward, she slowly began to lose her voice. Retreating further into the silence of her digital world, her classmates left well wishes, hoping she'd get better soon. She had lost her place in the real world, retreating into the digital one. Tamachi listens, chewing thoughtfully on his food. She texts that she's just a useless person, a coward who ran from the expectations of her sister and society. But Tamachi picks up a piece of food, ready to offer a correction. He says her sister's kindness is just her being pushy. He explains that he understands because he was raised the same way. Rina asks about his family, and he casually dismisses his parents as a total loss. He recalls a childhood spent trying to keep up appearances, where even the smallest failure was met with a swift and painful punishment. He played the part of the perfect son to avoid his parents' wrath. But in middle school, his mother was suddenly hospitalized. Rina listens, realizing how difficult that must have been. But for Tamachi, it was a golden age of freedom at his computer. His father, who knew nothing of computers, was simply in awe. Even his failing grades were excused due to his family's hardship. So when his mother finally passed away, he didn't feel any sadness. He just played the part of the grieving son, another role to perform. The real trouble, he recalls, began just before the memorial service, as the incense burned before her memorial tablet. He recalls being at his computer, furiously typing away, while the incense for his mother's memorial burned. He explains his father was trying to appease her relatives, but the incense kept breaking. And for that simple mistake, his father's fist came flying. He blamed Tamachi for the failure, telling him not to cause any more shame. Tamachi could only look down, taking the abuse in silence. But his father wasn't finished, grabbing him in a rage. And in that moment, something inside Tamachi finally snapped. He looked down at his father, his eyes filled with a lifetime of fury. And for the first time, his father looked back in fear. His eyes were cold, devoid of any emotion. He remembers standing there, a fresh bruise on his cheek. And in that moment, all his anger simply vanished. He explains that's how he became the man he is today. He apologizes for the depressing trip down memory lane. But Rina texts back that it's not boring at all. In fact, she finds his backstory incredibly intense, much to his amusement. She points out that her father and his parents are basically the same. But she thinks his parents are worse, completely unaware of their own cruelty. Unlike his, her mother had always been there for her. She explains that her mother's love gave her all the confidence in the world. So when that love was gone, she was left completely unable to recover. But Tamachi's experience was the complete opposite. He never knew that kind of unconditional love to begin with. Rina texts that his story has made her realize how blessed she truly is, a comment that leaves Tamachi completely baffled. She lists her stats: a 5-star family, prodigy-level intellect, and a blessed appearance. And yet, she spent her life convinced she was miserable. But Tamachi's thoughts cut through her self-deprecation, insisting she is unhappy. The silent declaration leaves her completely stunned. He takes a sip of his soup, completely unfazed by her shock. He bluntly states that her weak mentality is the real problem. He points out that she's aware of her issues but does nothing to fix them. And if she won't act, then the adults around her should have. He asks if anyone ever tried to help, beyond just telling her to go to school. Rina admits that no such wonderful adult ever existed for her. But Tamachi just smiles, offering himself up for the role. The simple, confident gesture leaves her completely breathless. She realizes he's made her talk about things she's kept buried for years. And in just a few months, he's done what no one else could. He leans forward, explaining he's come up with a solution. The root of the problem, he says, was the adults who failed her. A memory of her father's stern face flashes in her mind. Tamachi declares with absolute certainty that none of this was ever her fault. His words finally seem to break through her defenses. The sudden weight of his own statement seems to surprise him. He scratches his head, a little flustered by his own speech. He tells her to just get some rest, and she quietly agrees. And so another night falls on the infamous horror house. Rina lies awake, replaying his words in her mind. He had told her that none of this was her fault, a kindness that filled a void she'd carried for years. She buries her face in her pillow, completely overwhelmed. And a simple, undeniable truth finally surfaces. She likes him. She wants to be near him every second of every day. She knows this feeling is just a form of escapism, but he's the only one who has ever truly understood her. With a new resolve, she quietly slips out of her room. She sees the simple evidence of their shared life together. The evidence of their shared life sits on the table. She knows her sister would never forgive this. And so she kneels down, offering a silent apology to the sister she left behind. But she admits she never wants to leave her senpai. She clutches a plushie, her resolve hardening. The next day, she throws herself into her chores. Tamachi watches from a distance, a little surprised. He notices her clothes are starting to look a little worn. He can only watch as she scrubs away, lost in thought. And so another night falls on the infamous horror house. Rina presents another expertly crafted meal. Tamachi digs in, praising her cooking with genuine delight. His simple compliment leaves her blushing with happiness. He continues to eat, completely focused on the task at hand. He asks for a second helping, and she happily agrees. But after dinner, their true battle begins. In the game, Rina's avatar stands over his, confirming the kill. She pauses, claiming she's forgotten something, and then proceeds to do a victory dance over his fallen character, a true sign of friendship. Tamachi's avatar shouts in frustration as Rina's panda warrior continues its taunt. But back in the real world, her hand suddenly clenches. Tamachi turns, asking what's wrong. She just looks up with a bright, almost bashful smile. The scene then shifts back to the familiar bar Gam Gam, where Tamachi explains his latest revelation. He thinks Rina likes him, a theory that Gami-san finds absolutely hysterical. She teases him about the classic rom-com setup he's found himself in. But then she gets serious, asking how he really feels about Rina. And with a blush, Tamachi admits the obvious. Of course he likes her. He admits she's cute, young, and a perfect gaming partner. But Gami-san cuts through his delusion, explaining that Reina's feelings are different. She calls it what it is: simple dependency. He realizes that if Reina had met anyone else, she would have latched onto them just the same. Because from his perspective, it's clear she's just relying on him for survival. Gami-san holds up her glass, stating that's all there is to it. Her expression shifts, a dangerous smile spreading across her face, and she calls him out for being a complete and utter scumbag. She scolds him for making pathetic excuses like a child, accusing him of simply trying to avoid taking any real responsibility. He admits he lacks the confidence and resolve of a man. Gami-san points, calling him a pathetic little boy. She says his indecisiveness is embarrassing to watch, and Tamachi can only slump over the bar in defeat. She softens, realizing he's just afraid of their current relationship ending. But he looks up, admitting there's more to it than that. He knows this strange life they've built can't last forever, and if Rina ever decides she wants to go home, he's not sure what he would even do. And with that, Gami-san's patience finally snaps. Literally, she offers him some advice, friend to friend, telling him to make up his mind and finally take a risk. She scolds him for letting things stay so comfortable and easy, because no matter how good this lukewarm relationship feels, she reminds him that it has an expiration date. Her words echo in his mind as he steps out of the bath, only to be greeted by Rina, offering him a cold drink. He quietly accepts, taking the glass from her hand, and he wonders if anyone could ever escape this perfect comfort. He decides he doesn't want to think at all. He just wants this to last forever. He remembers something, holding out a bag for Rina. She looks inside, surprised to find an apron. He explains it's a little gift, a welfare benefit for his guard. She studies the color, a thoughtful look on her face, then holds it up to herself with a shy, pleased smile. She announces she's going to try it on, rushing to her room. Tamachi sips his drink, wondering if she'll just put it on over her clothes. A sudden, horrifying realization hits him, but she emerges, having put it on over her uniform, shyly calling his name. She does a little twirl, asking if it looks strange on her. Tamachi is completely baffled, asking about the high school uniform. Rina freezes, wondering how he could possibly know. She stammers, her face flushed with embarrassment. She admits she was thinking of wearing it on the battlefield. A comment so powerful it sends Tamachi into a full-body cringe. The scene then shifts back 2 months to a university campus, where Madoka's friend excitedly tells her companion she's found a new love. But the dark-haired girl just dismisses her with a cold remark. The friend pouts, demanding to know what she means by that. She simply closes her book, saying her words meant exactly what they said. She lists off Madoka's disastrous romantic history. Her friend bluntly states that every man she dates ends up ruined. She then asks what happened to the boyfriend she had in Tokyo. Madoka casually asks which of her 4 ex-boyfriends she means. Her friend explodes, shouting that she hasn't learned a single thing. But Madoka simply declares that she just wants to be in love. Her eyes sparkle as she admits she wants Tamachi more than anything. Her friend looks on, completely unimpressed by this fated meeting. Madoka's mind flashes back to a footbridge near the university, and the moment a stranger accidentally bumped into her on the stairs. A hand shot out, grabbing hers just in time. She had stumbled, her balance lost on the steps, but her fall was brought to a sudden, jarring halt. A stranger had caught her, holding her steady on the stairs. He asked if she was all right, his voice calm and concerned. And in that moment, the world seemed to sparkle around them. Her heart pounded in her chest, completely caught off guard. She tried to thank him, but he just waved it off, glad she wasn't injured. He simply picked up his bag, dusting it off without a second thought. But for Madoka, his simple kindness was a full-blown cinematic moment, and with a final step, he was gone, leaving Madoka completely and utterly starstruck. He'd told her not to worry about his bag, more concerned that she might have been hurt. A perfect cinematic moment for a girl who'd just met her prince. As he walked away, she was already completely lost in her feelings for him. But when she turned back, he had vanished without a trace. She could only stand there, completely stunned by his sudden disappearance. The moment was already slipping away into memory, and she could only curse herself for letting him go so easily. She had just missed her once-in-a-lifetime fated encounter. The scene shifts back to the familiar bar Gam Gam, where Madoka is dramatically recounting her fated encounter. She remembers seeing him at the bar for the very first time, and the moment he recognized her from their chance meeting. Back in the present, she tells her friend everything she's learned. Her friend is shocked, admitting he sounds surprisingly normal. Madoka lists his good qualities. He's polite and respectful. Her friend adds that he's a 26-year-old with a steady job, wondering if there's a catch. Madoka admits the only strange thing about him is his choice of residence. She explains the sordid history of his horror house, which her friend finds absolutely not normal at all. Madoka's friend recalls Tamachi's words about his home, and Madoka swoons, calling him brave for embracing the curse. A level of dedication that will soon lead to a little light trespassing. Her friend cuts through the fantasy, asking how many times she's even met him. Madoka sweats, admitting it's only been a couple of times at the bar. Her friend's patience finally snaps. She grabs Madoka, begging her to stop for her own good. She explains she can't bear to see her best friend crying again. This is Kashiwagi, Madoka's long-suffering companion. A woman who is always correct, always in control. But Kashiwagi isn't finished with her lecture just yet. She knows her friend won't give up on this new crush so easily. She reminds Madoka of her impulsive nature, and how many times it's led to heartbreak. She insists that Madoka needs to get to know this guy first. Madoka is touched, thinking her friend is so kind she'd fall for her if she were a man. Kashiwagi then suggests they hold a love strategy meeting over dinner. Madoka eagerly agrees, offering to cook at Kashiwagi's place as thanks. An offer that fills Kashiwagi with a sudden, deep sense of dread. Her mind flashes to the horrifying state of her own apartment. A domestic disaster zone not fit for human eyes. A mountain of trash bags piled high in the corner. Madoka demands to know when Kashiwagi last cleaned, getting a meek reply of yesterday. She reminds her friend that this has happened before, a familiar scene of domestic neglect. But with a cheerful smile, Madoka decides to clean it all up herself. Soon, the sound of sizzling meat fills the air. Madoka lectures her friend on the joys of a clean home, insisting she's capable if she just tries. She then asks about Kashiwagi's sister, wondering if she's attending high school. Kashiwagi confirms that she is, enjoying the meal her friend prepared. Madoka is relieved, recounting all the ways she's tried to encourage her sister from afar. But Kashiwagi quietly admits that her sister hasn't contacted her even once. Madoka is left completely confused by her friend's statement. She asks if Kashiwagi heard from their father, but her friend says he'd never report on her. Madoka then asks about the housekeeper, but Kashiwagi explains she's forbidden from sharing personal details. So Madoka asks the obvious question, who has she been talking to? Kashiwagi just holds up her chopsticks, explaining it's quite simple. She smiles, insisting that no news is good news. The lack of contact, she reasons, means there are no problems to report. A flawless bit of logic, really. But Madoka looks down, her expression filled with doubt. She wonders if perhaps she's been too soft on her sister all this time. But Kashiwagi's faith is absolute. Convinced her prodigy sister can handle anything on her own. But Madoka still feels uneasy, suggesting someone should check on her. Kashiwagi dismisses the worry, certain the school would call if there was a problem. Madoka can't help but feel her friend is being far too optimistic, a dark premonition that her anxiety would soon be proven right. The scene shifts forward to the end of September, and we return to the familiar lights of Bar Gam Gam, where Madoka has arrived, her hair styled perfectly. Her outfit chosen with care. She strikes a pose, declaring herself as cute as ever for the night ahead. But 3 months have passed since she met Tamachi, and she's made absolutely zero progress. She arrives at the bar, determined that tonight is the night she'll finally ask for his number. She imagines a perfect scenario where her prince has been waiting for her all along. With a fiery resolve, she prepares to make her move. Her hand reaches for the door, ready to seize her fated love. She throws it open, ready for her grand entrance. But she stops short, finding her friend Kashiwagi inside. Kashiwagi is distraught, explaining that her sister has run away from home. A quiet, pained expression crosses her face as she speaks. The news sends a jolt of pure shock through Madoka, and she runs out into the night, her mind racing with this sudden crisis. Kashiwagi's mind flashes back to a simpler time, to a childhood where she and her sister did everything together. They were a team, always by each other's side. She remembers a gift from their mother, a pair of hair clips. But her little sister noticed they weren't exactly the same. She wanted to match her big sister perfectly, but the colors were different. The small imperfections sent the young girl into a tantrum. Kashiwagi tried to comfort her, telling her not to cry. Their mother explained the matching clips were a sign of their bond, a symbol that even if they were different, they were still connected. Their mother explained it was her favorite color, a small comfort for a tearful child. The memory fades as Tamachi calls out to Reina in the present. He asks how much longer until dinner, and she turns with a smile, announcing it's ready. He can only look on, a little surprised. She's already wearing the new apron, thanking him for the thoughtful gift. He explains he chose the color to match the hair clips she always wears, a simple gesture that leaves Reina completely touched. She texts him that the clips are a precious memento of her mother, though she admits the original broke and she had her sister buy a replacement. Tamachi just smiles, telling her to take good care of it. A memory of the clips, a gift in their mother's favorite color, a young girl's bright, happy smile in response, a fleeting image of a happy family now long gone. Back in the present, Madoka runs through the streets in a panic. She arrives at Kashiwagi's apartment, throwing the door open. She finds her friend collapsed on the floor, calling out in alarm. Kashiwagi looks up, her eyes filled with despair. Her hand clenches into a tight, trembling fist. She finally reveals that her sister ran away from home 5 months ago, and the news hits Madoka with the force of a physical blow. Kashiwagi's expression hardens with a sudden dawning horror. She realizes her sister didn't just go to her place. She's been completely missing this entire time. Madoka panics, ready to call the police that very instant. But Kashiwagi grabs her, desperately telling her not to. Madoka can't understand, shouting that a girl has been gone for 5 months. Kashiwagi's grip tightens, her desperation palpable. She begs her friend through tears not to make that call. Madoka can only stare, asking why she would possibly stop her. Kashiwagi's hands tremble, her body shaking with a hidden fear. Madoka begs her friend to explain what's going on. Kashiwagi's mind flashes back to a recent holiday trip home. She was greeted by the housekeeper, who had prepared her room. She'd asked the woman to take care of her bags. And then she walked to her sister's room. She remembers being too pushy after Reina became a shut-in. Believing her own move to Tokyo was what allowed Reina to stay home. She had hoped they could finally talk, just the two of them. Her hand reached for the doorknob, ready to see her sister. But the room was completely empty, her sister long gone. Kashiwagi's mind reeled from the discovery. The housekeeper then asked how Reina was doing. Kashiwagi could only stare back, completely confused. The housekeeper smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. She mentioned how glad she was that the two sisters were getting along. Kashiwagi looked down, asking what she was even talking about. A quiet rustle of leaves marked the passage of time. The rain fell on the silent, empty house, and the housekeeper produced the note Reina had left behind. Kashiwagi sat in silence, the devastating truth finally sinking in. Kashiwagi's eyes widen in pure, unadulterated horror. The memory takes her back to her father arriving home, finding the housekeeper sitting alone in the dark. The woman looked up, her expression filled with a quiet dread. The memory hits Kashiwagi with the force of a physical blow. She had demanded to know why he never told her Reina was gone, but her father just dismissed the conversation as pointless. She had screamed back, reminding him it was his own daughter. He just looked at her, his expression cold and unfeeling. He said he'd talk if Reina was found, but until then he had nothing to say. He dismisses her concerns, saying it's a waste of time to discuss what's already done. Her hand clenches into a tight, trembling fist. She asks how he could arrange a marriage for Reina and force her to drop out of school. With a sudden, violent motion, he crushes the can in his hand. Kashiwagi screams that his daughter is not a tool for him to use. Her father just looks back, completely unmoved by her outburst. She asks if her own expectations for Reina were really so cruel. He insists the marriage was simply to protect his own position. But then he stops, telling her she's completely wrong. He explains that this was never about the marriage. It was about the school. Kashiwagi is left completely stunned by his revelation. He explains he never asked for some grand effort from Reina. All he wanted was for her to attend school, a task even a child could manage. But because she refused to do even that, her isolation was the inevitable result. He asks if it was truly so cruel to want his daughter to be normal. Kashiwagi can barely form a response, her mind reeling. The full, horrifying truth of his mindset finally dawns on her. Her own hand clenches, crushing the can just as he had. She finally sees the cold, unfeeling monster her father truly is. Her father turns the tables, questioning her own silence. The accusation hits her with the force of a physical blow. She can barely stammer out a response. She had believed that giving Reina space was the right thing to do. A cruel, knowing smirk spreads across his face. He points out that her logic is just as flawed as his. A quiet, devastating realization dawns on her, but she refuses to be compared to him, insisting her intentions were pure. He scoffs at the idea of feelings, stating that results are all that matter, and asks if her good intentions will be enough to find her missing sister. He tells her that finding Rina is a job for the police. His words seem to strike a nerve with his daughter. She asks if he really thinks the police will act for a missing minor. He insists that it's completely useless. He explains that the world is a harsh place for a runaway. Kashiwagi finally explodes, accusing him of only caring about his own reputation. She grabs her bag, her decision made. She storms out of the room, unable to listen to another word. But in her haste, she stumbles and falls to the floor. Looking up at him from the ground, she declares that she will protect Rina herself. She vows to save her sister, to protect her no matter what. She screams that they'll live together, away from all of this. But her father looms over her with a chilling ultimatum. If she calls the police, he'll cut them both off completely. Kashiwagi rises to her feet, her decision made. She declares she'll get a job, do whatever it takes to survive on her own. Her father just scoffs, completely unimpressed by her defiance. He asks how a 19-year-old can possibly juggle university, a job, and being a guardian. His cold logic hits her, the harsh reality of her plan sinking in. He calls her naive, a child who knows nothing of the real world's cruelty. But his words don't stop her as she slides the door open, stepping into the unknown. She steps out into the pouring rain, leaving her home behind. Her father's voice cuts through the downpour with one final offer. He tells her if she can find Rina quietly, he won't interfere. But his cold gaze reveals a chilling condition. He reminds her that her entire life is built on the reputation he provides. Kashiwagi can only ask him to send her things later. And with that, her father turns his back on her completely. She collapses in the rain, admitting she was far too naive. The harsh realities of rent, tuition, and survival close in around her. She realizes she's never had to truly struggle for anything in her life. She stood before the police station, the rain mirroring her despair. And eventually, she returned to her own apartment, defeated. Madoka asks if she really came back without filing a report. Kashiwagi can only point to the note Rina left behind. Madoka is furious, unable to believe her friend's family could be so cruel. She asks if Kashiwagi has any leads, but her friend has none. Madoka explains Rina withdrew a lot of cash, enough to go anywhere. The sheer hopelessness of the situation finally hits her. But Madoka refuses to give up, grabbing her bag with a new plan. She pulls out her laptop, ready to start the search herself. Madoka points out that they have one single clue, the laptop Rina left behind in her room, but it's locked with a password hint about Maple Day. Kashiwagi believes it must be a hint from Rina herself. She's been trying to crack it, but with no luck. Her frustration boils over, the dead end hitting her hard. Madoka notices her friend hasn't been sleeping. She knows Kashiwagi is worried, but tells her she needs to rest. Her hand gently rests on her friend's shoulder. She offers her hand, suggesting they get some sleep together. Madoka gently tucks her friend in, watching over her as she sleeps. She then takes her place at the laptop, determined to find a clue. The hint, Maple Day, echoes in her mind. She reasons it must be something Rina never received at home. A sudden thought strikes her. Could it be their mother's birthday? But she dismisses it, knowing only Kashiwagi would have that date. She playfully types in a guess, shouting, "Open sesame!" She leans back, joking that it was just a silly idea, until the screen unlocks, leaving her completely stunned. The hint was a clever pun, pointing to Kashiwagi's own birthday. Madoka realizes the password was Kashiwagi's birthday, a hidden message from Rina. With the laptop unlocked, she finds a single cryptic link waiting for her. It opens to a strange hidden object game, a puzzle left behind by Rina. Madoka is completely baffled by the bizarre game and its cheerful music, but she quickly realizes this is a message, a test for them to solve. She begins the tedious task of finding objects hidden in the crowd. The game seems to stretch on endlessly, a true test of her patience. But Madoka remains focused, determined to follow this digital trail, until a sudden flash of light signals the end of the puzzle, and just as suddenly, the game's music cuts out, leaving a heavy silence. A horrifying, stitched-up face suddenly fills the screen. The sight sends Madoka into a fit of pure, unadulterated terror. She slams the laptop shut with a panicked motion. The impact echoes through the otherwise silent room, a clear sign that the jump scare was, in fact, super effective. The sudden noise is enough to stir Kashiwagi from her sleep. Madoka frantically tries to wake her friend, pillow and all. Kashiwagi jolts awake, asking what just happened. Madoka points to the laptop, which has reopened to the game's title screen. She shouts that no sane person would ever start that game again. Madoka gently tries to get her friend's attention. Kashiwagi stirs from her sleep with a quiet apology. Madoka explains she's cracked the password, leaving Kashiwagi stunned. Now wide awake, she asks if she just needs to play the game. She's ready to dive in, but Madoka warns her to stop. Kashiwagi ignores her, her finger clicking down on the mouse, and the horrifying face fills the screen once again. The girls recoil in terror because of course they do. But Madoka realizes this must be a message from Rina, one that was meant specifically for Kashiwagi to see. Madoka realizes the link in the search history is the key. It leads to a forum post addressed to her sister's friend. The first comment is a string of mocking laughter. The two girls can only stare, completely confused. Madoka explains the password was a clever pun on Kashiwagi's birthday. She says Reina knew Kashiwagi couldn't solve it, but that Madoka could. A trap her sister had set, knowing they would work together. The post calls Reina a genius, but with a terrible personality. Kashiwagi jumps to her feet, insisting this is all a mistake. She screams that her sister is a kind and gentle person. Kashiwagi remembers a younger, happier Reina, a girl who was always so full of life. But Madoka asks at what age her friend is stuck. The question leaves Kashiwagi completely confused. Madoka points out that Reina isn't a child anymore. She's 15 years old now, not some little girl. The harsh truth makes Kashiwagi clench her fist. Madoka holds up her phone, explaining what really raised her. It wasn't her family, it was the internet. A world that taught her a completely different set of rules. A world that taught her a language filled with nothing but malice. Madoka shouts that Kashiwagi's well-meaning advice was just a burden to her sister. The harsh words land, and Kashiwagi's expression darkens with the truth. She sits in stunned silence, the reality of her failure sinking in. Madoka reaches out, her anger replaced with concern for her friend. She pulls Kashiwagi into a tight, comforting hug. Kashiwagi sobs that she promised her mother she'd guide Reina, and she failed her. Madoka reminds her that she was just a child who had also lost her mother. She begs her friend not to blame herself for what happened. But Kashiwagi can only cry, overwhelmed by the weight of her guilt. Madoka insists that her friend isn't to blame for any of this. She holds Kashiwagi close, a silent show of support. Her hand gently wipes away the last of the tears. Kashiwagi finally calms down, thanking her friend for being there. Madoka smiles, relieved to see her friend is feeling better. But then her expression shifts, a new theory forming in her mind. Kashiwagi is completely caught off guard by the sudden change. Madoka asks why Reina would even bother leaving a message. The question sends Kashiwagi's mind into a complete spiral. Madoka explains that this wasn't a cry for help. It was a declaration of war. Madoka's face contorts with rage, declaring that this little brat has just made a very powerful enemy. She vows to teach this girl who only knows the internet a harsh lesson about the real world. She grabs Kashiwagi, promising to drag Reina out of hiding and make her understand. The scene then shifts to a quiet suburban street. Tamachi walks home, happily thinking about what Reina might be making for dinner. But a voice calls out to him, asking for a moment of his time. He turns, surprised to see one of his neighbors. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, a small cat is kneading contentedly. Reina holds the feline close, a gentle smile on her face. Tamachi looks on, completely flustered by the attention. Reina presents the cat, introducing him to his new landlord. He tries to play it cool, insisting he doesn't mind at all. But the cat has other plans, lunging forward in a flash. Tamachi clutches his hand, cursing the surprisingly territorial feline. Later, another delicious meal is laid out on the table. As they eat, he asks why the cat has become a regular visitor. She explains it comes to pay respects to the house's spirits. A likely story. Reina looks down at her phone, a new idea forming. She playfully asks if he'd like to meet a beautiful high school girl, earning a swift and threatening reply. Tamachi's meal is interrupted by a sudden sound. He turns to find the cat, Kurosuke, staring him down. The feline drops a piece of paper on the table, a surprisingly detailed sketch of itself. Tamachi stares at the drawing, completely baffled, as Reina freezes in the background. He asks if she drew it, and she immediately bolts in a panic. He looks back at the drawing, impressed by the hidden talent. She texts him, embarrassed, saying her skills haven't improved since she was a kid. The news leaves Tamachi completely stunned. He asks if she ever wanted to be an artist, and she confirms his guess as sharp as ever. She explains that it wasn't her, but her sister who was the real artist. Tamachi is surprised, asking about this mysterious older sister. Reina admits that she just wanted to be the same as her in every way. It wasn't that she loved drawing, but that she loved doing what her sister did. With a bright smile, she declares that her sister is truly amazing. She even drew a police sketch that led to an arrest, earning a commendation. And by imitating that incredible talent, Reina developed her own skills. A quiet, knowing look crosses her face as she remembers. She wanted everything to be the same. Her studies, her hobbies, her clothes. And by second grade, she'd already caught up to her sister's academic level. She explains that once she reached her sister's level, She simply stopped studying altogether. Her own path came to a sudden halt, because she was only ever matching her sister's pace. A story that leaves Tamachi calling her a complete monster. She jokes that this is the point where a murder plot would begin, a quiet, almost unnerving smile on her face. And Tamachi imagines the dramatic cliffside confession. With their meal finished, the heavy conversation finally ends, and another day begins in their quiet, shared world. She explains her sister always called her cute, trying to be her safe space. And though she truly loves her sister, there's a reason she can't go back. She texts that she's just too scared to face her now. Tamachi listens from his desk, taking it all in. A quiet, serious look crosses his face. Rina then changes the subject, asking about his conversation earlier. He explains his neighbor is moving in with her son's family. Rina asks if that's the woman who owns Kurosuke, and Tamachi quietly confirms that it is. The news hits Rina with a sudden sharp realization. She asks if this means Kurosuke will be gone for good. Tamachi explains the son's family has a cat allergy, and that's why the neighbor came to him for help. Rina looks up, her eyes filled with a silent, hopeful plea. He admits the neighbor asked if he would consider adopting the cat. The very idea sends a jolt of pure excitement through Rina. She eagerly volunteers, promising to take full responsibility. But Tamachi just sighs, explaining that's not what he's worried about. A statement that leaves Rina completely and utterly confused. He explains the real issue is one of responsibility. The word seems to catch Rina completely off guard. He looks down at her, his expression uncharacteristically serious. He states that he won't take responsibility for her future, and asks if she accepts that. And with a quiet voice, she agrees. But then he brings up Kurosuke, the cat sleeping peacefully nearby. He explains that one wrong move could cost them their home and the cat its new life. He asks what she would do if they couldn't keep that promise. The cat in question just trembles in her arms and lets out a massive world-ending yawn. But Kurosuke suddenly leaps from her arms, landing squarely on the floor before them. He sits before Tamachi, his expression a silent challenge. The room falls quiet as the two of them face off. Kurosuke's gaze is steady, his resolve clear. Tamachi explains the harsh truth. He can't guarantee a future for the cat. He asks one last time if Kurosuke is truly okay with this. The cat's profile is etched with a quiet, unshakable determination, and with a single defiant meow, he gives his answer. Rina can only watch, completely moved by his decision. A paw taps the floor, sealing the deal, and with a grin, Tamachi accepts his fate. He presents the cat, declaring this its new home. He leans in for a friendly greeting, and is immediately met with a flurry of claws. Tamachi recoils as the cat makes a graceful escape. Kurosuke lands with a hiss, asserting his dominance. Tamachi realizes he's just adopted a tiny, furry demon. But Rina happily scoops him up, her new companion. And just like that, their quiet home has a new resident. He explains that a place to belong isn't something her sister can just give her. It's something she has to choose for herself. Rina looks up, realizing he's right, just like Kurosuke, and she agrees with a bright, heartfelt smile. With that, they decide to throw a welcome party for their new housemate. The scene then shifts back to the familiar lights of Bar Gam Gam. Gami-san notes how much he's changed, but he just says the house feels more alive now. But she looks at him with genuine concern, asking if he's really okay. He just laughs, saying he'll get used to his new companions eventually. But Gami-san cuts through his cheerful facade with a single serious concern. Money. Tamachi chokes on his drink, the reality of his finances hitting him. She asks how he plans to support a girl and a cat on his meager salary. But their conversation is cut short by a new arrival at the door. It's Madoka, and she has a desperate plea. She looks to Gami-san and Tamachi, her eyes wide with panic. And then she lunges forward, begging Tamachi for help as Gami-san watches in amusement.